Welcome to Motors and Medicine. On today's episode, back in the garage working on the Bronco. I haven't been driving it for past maybe a couple weeks. The reason for that is about 2 weeks ago or so, I took it to a buddy of mine. He used to own a shop and still has access to it. We went there to install a leveling kit on this Bronco. And as you can tell, it definitely has the leveling kit installed. However, when we were installing the leveling kit, we noticed that driver's side axle, the outer CV joint looked a little bit off, like something was wrong with it. And I'm not sure if it's something that we did manipulating everything to install it, or if it already had some prior damage from off-roading, who knows what. I have actually been in the forums. It turns out that the front axles in these Broncos aren't quite as strong as they could be. So that could be part of the problem. I don't know. But in any case, today I'm going to be installing two things. The first is a new axle on the new driver's side axle on this front side of the Bronco. And the second thing I'm going to be doing is installing a quick release end link for the sway bar. So my particular Bronco is not a Badlands or a first edition, so it did not come with the automatic push button anti-sway bar release so that you could get more articulation. But there is a kit out there that you can install, and with just a pull of a simple pin, you can make your Bronco you can release it from the anti-sway bar so that you can get that extra articulation. So I'm going to be installing that as well. But first and foremost, I'm going to be getting this thing jacked up, get the wheel off, and then I'm going to show you guys again kind of what I'm going to be doing. And, we'll kind of do some pauses throughout, but hopefully I can show you guys how to take this axle off. And it's a little bit of work, but if you have the right tools, it shouldn't be too difficult. So I'm going to kind of just commence with that, and we'll kind of, like I said, along the way, I'll do some interim little discussions about what's going on and show some pictures and whatnot. So until further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, so I got the wheel and tire off. It's a pretty big tire. So here we're going to look at the structure. Basically what I'm going to be doing is removing the upper control arm, the lower control arm, the tie rod here, and then on this side over here we're going to be removing the anti-sway end link here, because I'm going to be replacing that. So the tools needed for this, as you can see, I have two different jacks. One to jack the car up to get the wheel to clear so you can get it off. And I actually happen to have a compressor and an impact to get the wheel and lug nuts off, as well as I'm going to use that same impact to undo a lot of these bolts here because they're going to be on super tight. Obviously, after I put them back on, I'm going to torque them to spec. But basically, the sockets you need for this are a 21-inch, an 18-inch, and an 18 millimeter, a 21 millimeter, and a 35 millimeter, because everything on this vehicle is metric. So the upper control ball joint right here, this nut is an 18. The tie rod's a 21, the anti-sway bar end link is a 21, and the bottom, the lower control arm on the knuckle is also a 21. Here, the axle nut is a 35 millimeter. So if you've got the tools, you can easily do this in your own home. So what I'm going to do is just start unbolting this stuff, and I'll actually zoom in here real quick so you can kind of see. Hopefully you guys can see that. Here, these are the bolts, and there's a spacer in here for the lift. for the leveling kit. There's another one underneath here. So this particular leveling kit was a Zone Off-Road 1-inch leveling kit. So it comes with two pieces. One that goes on the top of the strut mount assembly. So basically we had to take the strut off, put it on top, slide it back up, and then the same thing on the bottom. So two spacers, and it equals out to 1 inch. But it really helped give the front end a nice, more aggressive look. Just too bad that now I have this axle problem. So I'm going to kind of zoom in on the axle so you guys can see what's going on with it and why I'm replacing it. So if you guys can see, I'm actually going to go and grab a light so you guys can see this a little bit better. All right, guys. So as you can see here, hopefully it's not too blinding, but you can see how the CV boot there is like all wrapped up on itself. Basically what that means is that either in the process of installing the leveling kit, which I don't think so, because we really didn't do anything to manipulate it very much. I think the axle just, the axle, the two CV joints on an axle are kind of like a universal joint when they come together. And if you kind of, I guess if you have either too much pull on one end, it can disengage that U-joint just a little bit. And that's what's happening here. So the axle, when it spins, right now, the vehicle's obviously normally in just rear wheel drive. When it's in auto or 4-wheel high or 4-low, then the axle is engaged and it's going to, now it's an open diff. So one side's going to move. They're both going to move on good grip, but if one side starts to slip, then the other side will move and vice versa. But the point is that unless you lock them, of course, which I have a locker on this, but right now the axle is spinning, the CV joint is spinning independently of the axle itself. And that means that the U-joint itself has kind of become disengaged or dislodged somehow. And so it's spinning independently. So because I haven't used the 4-wheel drive, or also because I haven't been engaging the locker, anything like that, it's really not an issue to drive it. I haven't really driven it a whole lot anyway, just because I didn't want to mess it up any further. But the reality is that if your axle has, a CV joint that's damaged or disengaged part way, this thing is kind of going in and out. And so sometimes it engages and it'll spin all as one unit, and sometimes it comes apart. And whenever it comes apart, I can literally hear it thunk, and it'll just make this awful thunking sound because it's literally spinning independently of the other part of the shaft. So it's not a good thing. We definitely need to get rid of it. So I got a new replacement axle from Ford. It's an OEM piece. I probably could have taken it to the dealer to see if they'd replace it, because it really shouldn't have broken or worn out at this point. But my schedule is so tight, I don't have time for that. And I kind of wanted to do this project anyway, just because I could at least show you guys what it looks like to do the project. So next step is to start breaking this stuff loose. And once I have that done, I'll show you guys what that looks like. All right, so about 30 minutes later, you can see here that the knuckle is off. Here's the axle with the screwed up CV joint. Here is the end link for the sway bar. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this, then remove the axle, and we'll go from there, and I'll show you what that looks like when it's out. All right, guys, so now I'm going to show you how drastic this axle is and how messed up it really is. You can see here, that's where the axle lives. That's the front diff. These are the axles right here. And if you see, I've kind of got them lined up, but look how contorted this is here. This is what it should look like. This is what it looks like, because this mechanism has kind of just come undone and disconnected. So look how much longer the axle is. That's why this thing is thunking and just not functioning right. So I don't know if that was just a defect from the factory, or like I said, during the manipulation, I don't know. All I can say is that from what I've read on the forums, these axles are not super heavy duty or tough, which is just fantastic, right? That's the last thing I need, is for one of these axles to break out on the trail when I'm down in Moab or something. But nonetheless, I'm going to pop this new axle in, start putting everything back in the reverse order. And, this is just a lesson, like whether it was my fault or not, or if it was just a defect from Ford, I don't know. Everything else on this front suspension is pretty meaty. I mean, the control arms are aluminum, but strong. I don't know if you can notice here on the tie rod, I actually installed a tie rod sleeve because this is a common brake failure, or a breakage point or failure point on these rigs. And so installing one of those tie rod sleeves basically does the same job as switching out the whole tie rod for something more heavy duty. I just thought, well, it's easier just to pop a sleeve on there because it gives it a lot of strength. But everything else on this front suspension is really, super strong. I'm just not super impressed with the axles right now. So we'll see how things end up performing. I'm going to be going back to Moab in about a month or maybe a little bit less. And so I just wanted to get this axle fixed because that's the last thing I needed, was to break down in Moab with this wonky axle. So we'll continue with the build here. I'm just going to install this other piece and go from there. So take another pause, get that installed, and I'll show you that. All right, guys, so now I was kind of monkeying with this new adjustable end link. So first I'm going to show you what this piece looks like. It looks like this. And this usually goes right here into the sway bar and into the control arm, like that. The piece that replaces it is this. So this is adjustable. This is the pin. You can pull that pin out, lift this up, and the bracket is this right here. This bracket's going to get mounted over here on the I guess it's like the brake line bracket, and that's where you can hang your end link when you disconnect it for off-roading. You just pull that pin, lift it up, and hook it up right there so it's out of the way and it won't get caught on anything. So now that that's kind of roughly installed, just lightly, loosely right now, I'm going to go ahead and put everything back together, and then we'll do another picture of that and see how it looks. So one more shot. This is the axle, the brand new axle that I installed. You can see it fit nice. It went back in really quick and easy, nothing to it. So now I'm just gonna install all this other stuff and then we'll see how it looks. All right, guys. So after just, it was a little tricky getting the knuckle back on with the new axle. I learned that you have to insert the lower ball joint just a tiny bit into the drop hole. At the same time, you're threading the axle through. So lower ball joint right here, center axle. Here's your tie rod. Here's the upper control arm, and that'll do. You guys can see here that this guy's been installed loosely. I will button it down now. Everything needs to be torqued to spec, but not bad. I mean, you see the new axle installed there now. We'll show it from this end over here. There's the other end there. At the end of the day, it's not that difficult. You just need tools. So, like I said, you need a 35 millimeter for the axle. You need an 18 for the upper ball joint, 21 for the tie rod, 21 for the end link on the sway bar, and then 21, these are all in millimeter for the lower ball joint nut. And once you take those all off, you want to support the bottom like I did here with another jack. So I use this jack to lift up the vehicle, and then this jack over here is just supporting the lower control arm so that when you give, you're not going to use like a pickle fork or anything like that. What you're going to use is just a heavy mallet, and you're going to whack the control arm until until you're gonna whack the control arm until everything comes loose, basically, and then you can pop them all off. And that's what I did. I didn't want to show that because it's just really loud and obnoxious, but that's what I did. I just did that and popped them off. And then you saw, I removed the axle, put the other one in. It's very just straightforward, plug and play. These Broncos are actually really easy to work on. They're not difficult at all. So, I'm just going to finish up buttoning up a few things here. Torque down that adjustable sway bar guy. Make sure I torque everything to spec, and then put the wheel back on. And so we'll take a look at that when it's done. All right, so I got everything torqued down. Turns out that the axle nut here is 220 pound-feet of torque. The lower ball joint nut's about 210. Everything else is about 45 to 50 pound-feet of torque, so I got all those squared away. Everything's buttoned down tight. Now the only thing that's left is for me to put the wheel back on and, make sure that this thing is not having problems. But as you can see, you can see that the accordion of the axle looks perfect, and it does not look like this hunk of crap that I just took off. So, get the wheel back on and call it a day. That should be the end of the video. I just wanted to show you guys. Oh, and I'll do one more quick view of the adjustable end link, the quick release end link here. So this is the adjustable end link right here. You pull this pin out, lift this up, and then right here is where you hook it up into. So you lift it up, pop it in this guy, pop the pin in, and then now you've got more articulation. Now, I've only put it on one wheel for now. You can, when you're off-roading, you can do both to have even more articulation. And I'll probably do the other side as well. I just ran out of time right now. But it's the installation of that is really easy. Everything else is just pretty straightforward. So hopefully this video was helpful for you guys who have Broncos, or even just anything that's, kind of front end related, where that's got an independent front suspension where you've got to swap an axle. The one thing that I forgot to mention was to get the axle off, all you need is a pry bar. And this is what I use. So you pop the pry bar in between basically the front diff, and just get a little bit of leverage, and that's what pops the, because the axles have like a little C-clip on the end that kind of lock them in place. And so you just pop that out and the whole axle comes out once you've got everything else removed. So, yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of a project, took a little bit of time, a couple hours, with, stops, video, and all that stuff along the way. But I'm pleased with it. Hopefully I've fixed this problem, because this thing was, I couldn't really drive it. Obviously, this thing was thunking so bad, and I'm just really disappointed. I expected a stronger axle from Ford. Hopefully, and like I said, in the forums, a lot of these guys that have these Broncos are actually installing like really strong heavy-duty front axles for this very reason. But we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I don't have to do this again, because it's a real bit of work to get all this stuff off, and the knuckle is super heavy. And I didn't take the brake caliper off because I just didn't want to make more work for myself. But if you do it, you can take the caliper off and lighten it up a little bit, and then it's a little bit easier to work. But I did all this by myself, not a single hand helping me. So it's a lot more work when you're doing all this lifting and all that by yourself, but I got it to go, so it's not that bad. And I'm not a mechanic on a daily basis. I just do this stuff for fun. I did a little mechanicking to pay for school, to get me through school back in the day. But really, this is just something I do as a hobby. But just about anybody could do this. So hopefully this video was helpful. I didn't, go into too much detail on taking stuff off, just because, I pointed out what was what tools you needed, the sockets you needed. At the end of the day, it's all just very plug and play. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, just give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe if you haven't hit the subscribe button. It'll help the channel grow. And then, of course, on the next video, we'll get back into the medicine, and I'll see what we get into. But until then, this is Motors and Medicine. Signing off. Have a good one.